Everybody, this is Perch, and Joe and I are back with Joe Casey. It's going to get weird.
Yep.
We'll see what happens here. Joe, how are you?
I'm good. I'm ready to get weird. Come on.
Excellent. Let's get as weird as we can. Because everyone that listened to it at least seemed to like the last time we were all talking.
Yeah. They did really well. People were really liked it. But I know what Joe's about to say, and he's right.
Yeah, but one of the things that people kept bringing up was you didn't talk about the stuff that I wanted to hear about because you've apparently done a lot. So
okay.
But one of the things we completely glossed over in the actual interview was you're the co-creator of soon-to-be, movie star America Chavez.
That's true. That's true. That is one of the things I have done. Yes.
Yes.
How have you been following? So this character is interesting. I mean, in the sense that you create this character. They had a solo run, or sorry, it was in a Young Avengers title. They had a solo run. They announced a Disney movie. The Disney people who were producing that series, I suspect, read your stuff and read the early stuff. Because if you looked at the original kind of thoughts behind the character, it read a lot like your introduction and what Kieran Gillen did for Young Avengers. And then it felt like somebody in the production studio read the solo book where they gave her history. Because very quickly then Marvel put out a limited series where they completely retconned her entire history and changed it entirely.
Yes.
Have you been keeping up with all this?
I have been watching from afar and, emitting the occasional guffaw.
Okay.
As they scramble to come up with something that the average moviegoer will fucking understand.
Yes.
Wait a minute. You don't think her coming from a parallel dimension where they've got Soda Sotomayor College somehow, you don't think that moviegoers would have figured that out?
I think somebody like Sam Raimi looks at that, and even Sam Raimi scratches his head.
Well, the other thing, too, is it like, she couldn't get into Kagan University? She had to settle for Sotomayor?
She didn't keep her grades up. Yeah.
Wow.
Listen, I get it. It wasn't like anybody was giving anybody any direction anyway. So there's a lot of blame to go around. I mean, stupid me, I created her as I figure there's two ways you create a character for Marvel Comics. Both of them end up in heartbreak, but there's two ways to do it creatively. One is you lay it all out, the whole history, everything about the character, it's their past, their present, their status quo, what they are supposed to be, their mission statement, all of it, boom, right there, so that there's no confusion going forward. Or you do what I did, which is kind of go the Wolverine way, which is introduce a character, try to establish character traits, a power set, but leave some mystery there.
Mm-hmm.
And leave the door open for really to let fans in. I feel like that was Wolverine's secret to success, besides the violence and the sea change in culture that he sort of was part of. But the fact that fans and readers could imprint their own idea about where he came from and what he was all about, that kept him going for a long time. And in fact, I was at Marvel writing Uncanny X-Men when the whole Wolverine origin miniseries was brought up as a thing to do. And they came to everybody that was writing at the time, Grant, myself, I think Peter Milligan, I think possibly Claremont, and said, who wants to do this? And my recollection is, to a man, we all said, don't do it at all.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
Smart.
But that was a time, that was the time of New Marvel where it was like, what haven't we done? What sacred cows have we not killed? Let's kill them all. And so I forget who ended up doing it. I think Paul Jenkins might have.
It was Paul Jenkins, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But in my opinion, Wolverine was never the same.
No, God, no.
Yeah.
And not only that, I mean, I have a vague recollection of like an image of like Kid Wolverine standing in a wheat field. Other than that, I couldn't tell you what that origin series, you know, gave us, or what I don't know what his origin is. So they did the series, but it didn't stick with me, you know.
Well, they did a follow-up. They did an Origins 2, didn't they?
Oh God, really?
I'm pretty sure they did. They did a follow-up there.
They did, and they've changed other things. And I mean, at one point during that that comic I was torturing Joe with, the Marvel, they revealed that Wolverine was actually a Neanderthal. Yeah. Yes. And so that, I mean, they've done a few things, but it's been a mess. You're right. But when you create America Chavez, you did, in my mind, at least as a reader, you did the right thing. You created a character, you put some personality, you were trying to go with mystery.
Yes, but then I was not in control of that character after the introduction that I did. So what happened after that, you know, I mean, there was, I don't know. What can I tell you guys? It was a big clusterfuck creatively. And the history bears that out. I don't think I'm telling tales out of school when I say that there was confusion and there was, what I'd said in the past, and I still believe this, is that what she became was an open source character where fans were really throwing a lot of stuff in there, and then creators, for some reason, I mean, I guess this is part of the Twitter generation. Creators were seeing what fans were saying online and saying, "Hey, let's just put that in." You know, let's just go in that direction, because if you're seeing a reaction online and you have nothing else to go on, why not lean into that in lieu of any other bright ideas? You go, well, this person tweeted this saying that kind of fits the character, so let's appropriate that. This other, you know, tweet talks about where she could be from. Why not use that? And so it became this pile-on of ideas that were coming from everywhere, except, I suspect, from Marvel editorial.
Right.
Yeah.
And that can be a problem and can end up being very confusing for creators and readers. I can't, there's enough blame to go around, and none of it should go to any one place. You know, there's enough for everybody to share the load.
Sure. Did you ever, like, when you had this character, she wasn't the only character you created in Vengeance. There was it the Ultimate Nullifier and a couple of other
what happened to the Ultimate
characters?
Nullifier?
Yeah, whatever happened to the Ultimate Nullifier? I never hear him being used.
Where's his solo book?
Right?
Exactly.
But did you idly even think, like, oh, maybe it'd be cool if one of these characters, you know, even went anywhere? Is that not even like a thing you think about when you do something like this? You're just like, oh, here, let me do this, and then good.
What had happened was I had come up with an idea for the Teen Brigade before there was ever a Vengeance miniseries, and I pitched it. I forget who I pitched it to at Marvel, but it had Ultimate Nullifier, America Chavez. It had the In-Betweener. As a kid, he was in there, and a couple of others, and that pitch didn't go. So then when I got the Vengeance book, and really that was one of those things where they had 6 covers painted and they had to use them, so they said, come up with a story. So I just took everything that I'd been doing at Marvel up to that point, from Stacy X to Deathlock to The Last Defenders to the Teen Brigade I hadn't, that I had pitched, and just threw it all in there. And so, so those characters predated that miniseries, and I just needed a story. And that whole book was meant to be, that was the time where event books were really getting out of control.
Yeah.
Sort of around 2010, I guess. And so I thought, well, I'll do an event book that has no tie-ins, no impact anywhere else, but it'll have all the bells and whistles of an event book. I have all these characters, I have this sprawling storyline. And, it was more of a creative exercise than anything else. Because when they come to you and say, we have 6 covers of classic Marvel villains, none of which are really in the incarnation that these covers portray. Like there was Loki, who at the time was Kid Loki. There was Doc Doom, who at the time was, what's his name? Christoph, the kid. Doc Doom.
Jesus. Everyone was a kid for a minute there.
Oh, I know. But look, it went into my story of like generational divide and all that. So I made it work as best I could. And I'm actually pretty proud of that story for what it started out as to what it became.
Yeah.
And what it spawned. It's got some legs. So it's funny. It's not even out in trade yet.
Jeez. And it's weird hearing some of the, weird may be the wrong word, but like we've done some of these other interviews, and like Glenn Greenberg, for example, talked to us about how he got to write that Goblin's Journal one shot because he had a meeting with editorial, and they were like, we have this book in the schedule. We wrote down Goblin's Journal, and we have no idea what the hell that is. Could you come up with a book that's called Goblin's Journal to fit in this slot we apparently promised people?
Yeah.
And that goes back, that's during like the Clone Saga. So it's like there's a long history of Marvel just kind of being like, we found like some covers, or we accidentally wrote a thing down. Could someone make a comic? Someone, please?
Yeah, they gave me the title too, and I was like, okay, whatever. It has nothing to do with the story. Like, it's got to be called Vengeance. And I was like, because? And they had no answer. All right.
Oh,
that's how the sausage is made, folks.
Comics.
I'm kind of like of two minds about it. On the one hand, it is complete chaos. On the other hand, if you can keep your wits about you during that chaos, some good shit can come out of it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Well, and I mean, now we have this new Disney Plus series for America. It's going to be in Doctor Strange. You've got a big royalty check coming.
You're setting me up. I see you're setting me up. No, that's still that's still in discussion. Let's put it that way.
Oh, I'm glad there's a discussion.
Well, there's not been any compensation for the creation of that character. Let's put it that way. Not yet.
Okay, fair enough. You worked with Nick Dragotta on that book, right?
I did.
How was that working with Dragotta? Is a talent that would go on to do East to West and other things. What was it like working? I mean, you worked with, of course, a million comics, a million different artists, but what you were creating a lot of new characters in this case. What was that like?
I whooped his ass, is what I did. I put him down. I made him work. Made him work for his money. Like there was a million characters. He was very enthusiastic at the time to really do something and distinguish himself, and he had already, in my eyes. But he was really doing work at that time between that book and the stuff he was doing on. I think he was doing one of the FF books. Mm-hmm. I feel like that's when he planted his flag, in the mountain. It's when he put himself on the map, I feel like.
It's a very good series. I hope people will check. I mean, because that had the Young Masters of Evil in that as well, I believe.
Yep.
And there was a character in that, Sophie, I think, was in that. She was in the Loki series. So you've got characters going to movies and TV all over the place. You're
kidding me. See, I didn't even know that. Wait a minute. Where's my lawyer?
Yeah, there you go. Let's get that up.
No, I've got a character in the Ed Norton Hulk movie. I didn't even know until literally when all this America Chavez stuff was going on. I kind of stumbled because I don't remember seeing that movie, to be quite honest. But a character I created in my very brief Hulk run ended up in that movie, and I think they altered her name slightly. But when I was looking for other things, it was online. It's like, oh, and he created this character that's in the Hulk movie. It's like, oh, really? So it's weird. It's weird what they pull from and why they pull from it, and when they don't tell you, it's even better.
It sounds wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, kind of shifting gears a little bit. I mean, we talked a little bit about your image work and the various products you did there, and we mentioned that it was like a complete tonal shift from working at Marvel at the time.
Yes, for sure.
Has Image changed? I mean, from your perspective, just when you were there, kind of the time, the different titles that you put out through Image. I mean, we've seen different versions of Image over the last 20, 30 years, haven't we?
I would say so. I think it depends on the kind of creator you are. It depends on what you like to do, what you are capable of doing when it comes to making comics. When we talked a little bit about this last time, I mean, I like the from soup to nuts production process of comics. I was interested in that. So to go to Image made perfect sense because you're able to be involved in all those steps as opposed to just being one part of the assembly line process. And I think some creators go to Image and have difficulty with that complete production process. What always gets me scratching my head is when a writer or an artist or a writer-artist goes to Image and then, you know, no offense, Joe, hires an editor.
Yeah.
Because I just assume that's for another set of eyes and maybe the comfort level of having someone who is kind of making sure the trains run on time. And so I get it, but for me, that's never been much of a problem. So I would say that my version of Image Comics is kind of unique to me, and I guess others like me. So it's like anything else. It's what you get out of it all depends on what you want to put into it, you know?
Yeah.
It makes sense. I mean, it in some ways, do you think it's more that they're hiring kind of a project manager than an editor? They just don't know really to call it that?
I guess so. I think that's probably the case in some instances. But they should call them a project manager.
Yeah.
I mean, they shouldn't get hung up on credits. They should call them what they are, if that's what they are.
Yeah.
I've been watching some of the news. I don't know if you've been following some of what's coming out of DC and kind of as that company has changed over the last year and the different shortages in editorial and some of this other stuff.
Also.
Yeah. It seems like the role of a project manager is potentially different from editorial and something some of these big companies might take advantage of.
I agree. I mean, I don't know what's going on over at DC. Obviously, they're completely overwhelmed with the amount of stuff they're putting out in relation to the amount of people they have to put them out. So I have all the sympathy in the world for them, and I hope they get their shit together, because it seems like they're going in two opposite directions. And on the one hand, they're losing staff left and right. Either they're getting fired or they're leaving of their own accord, you know, and good for them for finding other work. That's great. But at the same time, they seem to be doubling down on the amount of stuff they're putting out.
Mm-hmm.
And those two things don't go together to me.
Yeah. I mean, it's, as somebody who's worked in the industry, I mentioned this before, and it scratched my head from a retailer perspective. And then Joe and I have commented, of course, it seems counterproductive to be short on staff and have this confusion, and then up your line to 76 books a month.
Well, I understood it when Marvel was the pre-Disney sale, when Marvel had to prove, they were, a publicly traded company. They had to prove to their shareholders that every quarter was going to go up.
Right.
And so when the pressure's on to keep bettering yourself, you'll throw anything at the wall and hope that it sticks, and you'll lean into big events, and you'll do what you think are the money-making sure things. But now I don't understand really what the impetus is, and I don't even think it seems like the pressure's off for there to be a war at the retail level of having the most product out. I mean, there's no danger. I mean, it used to be, you'd hear back in the day that, well, one company wanted to push the other company off the stands by, amount of product. That never seems to be an issue these days. So I honestly don't know what the game plan is in terms of Marvel versus DC, the quote unquote big two. But they're certainly just rolling it out as quick as they can make it. It's kind of weird.
It's it's a strange strategy. I can't quite understand what's going on. But I mean, we're in a time of massive change. You have to change to DC. You have a bunch of changes at Marvel, although they're kind of being kept more behind the curtain. We've got writers going to Substack, and we have people announcing deals with Amazon. Like, when you look at the landscape of all this stuff, like what's your take on all of it?
Well, I feel like it's just getting more and more decentralized. Mm-hmm. There's no center of this universe anymore. There's no true north to the business, to what would be considered, in a general sense, fandom. It's just a lot of, and this has happened all over pop culture for the last, couple of decades. So it's not new to comics and it's not unique to comics, but it is a bit, I don't know if I'm sad about it, because I lived through a time where things were fairly centralized, where there was Wizard Magazine, there was Newsarama Online, and there was Marvel and DC, and then the second tier of publishers. Mm-hmm. And you could count them on one hand. Mm-hmm. And you knew what you were dealing with. Now, not so much. And on the one hand, you could say there's an abundance of opportunity. That's cool. But on the other hand, it's hard to get a handle on the business that you're in. It's hard to kind of get a sense of, where are things at? Where are they going? How can we take advantage of things when they're good and course correct when they're bad? If you don't really know where things are at, you can't do either one of those things with any real effectiveness. And that will become a problem soon enough.
Your thoughts are mirroring a lot of mine lately, because we hear a lot about more opportunity is great, and I think it's true. And I do see that side of it, and I agree. More options, more places comics to be vended, more disruption. That's all great. But you hit on something that I worry about, or have been thinking about more and more lately, which is, in the midst of this disruption, we have less data, we have less information, we have less anchors, and it feels like it's a prime way that people are going to get taken advantage of.
Yeah, I'd like to think that all people have to do that are in the industry, all professionals have to do, is look at history, study your history. And if you do that, you could probably avoid 75% of the pitfalls that are out there. Mm-hmm. But I got to say, my real concern is that it's hard to know sometimes where the good work is. Mm. Because you just don't know. It's not being talked about, or it's not being talked about in places that I pay attention to or have access to or whatever. And it used to be, I mean, I've been there once or twice where what you're doing is, again, the center of the universe for the business that you're in. And people know about it. Whether or not they read it, that's another issue. But the awareness was not a problem. Whether you had the big marketing push behind you of one of the big publishers, or that your work had a quality that was catching fire at a grassroots level. If one of those things were happening, generally everybody tended to know about it.
Yeah.
And both of those things seem lacking to me. And maybe I'm not, I'm perfectly willing to admit I might not be looking in the right places, but I feel like I'm in this business. I keep my ear to the ground to a fairly substantial level, and I don't think I'm missing anything. I just think I'm not hearing about anything because there's nowhere to talk about it.
Yeah, and in particular with some of the moves that have been going on now, like we're seeing a lot of people like leave Twitter for Substack, and some people are getting advances and things like that. But like part of the decentralized nature of all this is it doesn't seem like there's a lot of direction from anywhere. And maybe because of social media, maybe because we're constantly getting inundated with updates on things in a way we weren't years ago, it's become a lot more apparent to the larger audience that, all the smoke and mirrors are gone. And now we have this different understanding of things. And maybe that's causing, some of the hysteria around this stuff. But even beyond that, I'm curious what you think about like some of these people jumping in. Like even if they have some experience, you know, the experience levels are all over the place in Substack, but it seems like people are getting like advances, and then they're like, "You're smart, you'll figure out a comic people like, go." And that is a recipe for just a disaster for some people.
Well, I mean, I think you hit on it. This is, you know, we should, after we talk about this, let's move on to some fanboy shit just to give our brains a rest.
Oh, for sure.
It's all about money. And Twitter started out, I think, for professionals in the field as what they thought was an opportunity to grow their audience, to, you know, to steer people to their product. I think once, and this was a couple of years ago now, maybe even longer, when it kind of became apparent that Twitter followers do not equal sales.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's when Twitter became a free-for-all. And then it just became expression of the id as opposed to a marketing tool. Substack is the newest iteration of this is where the money is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it's always been like that. It's always going to be like that. I was listening to one of your videos, Perch, and where you were talked about you'd signed up just to get the name for a Substack account, and you got inundated with just emails that were people signing up, to nothing though, for nothing, right?
Right, for nothing, for nothing and for nothing, That pretty much sealed the deal for me because I felt like the Substack thing. I mean, whatever their political platform has been, or whatever the optics of them have been, the free newsletter thing is interesting if you want to connect with your readership, I guess. But when I heard about your experience, I was like, yeah, maybe not. I've got a pretty good handle on my email etiquette, and thousands of emails coming in that you can't control. No thanks. No thank you. Well, filters took care of it, but still, it was, I don't know. It's a strange experience, and people don't know yet what they're doing there. I do have to laugh a little bit at the numbers that are being tossed around. I've heard people speculating on what some of these advances are. Somebody was saying, I think it was Rob Liefeld was saying, I'm hearing somebody got $600,000 as an advance, and
well, then you know it's true.
You know it's true.
No, look, I'm happy for anybody who can get money. I mean,
Sure.
Substack is basically a startup, right? I mean, it's a startup, and startups usually are somewhat flush with cash if they're going to make any impact at all. And people come in, they drain them of that cash, and then things move on. And we'll see how it goes. Hopefully, good work will come out of it and paid, and
it'll be interesting. For what it's worth, I know two of the bigger names, and they both got 60,000. So, we'll see.
That's not chump change.
No, I'm good for them for getting that cash. It's interesting to see these crazy numbers get thrown around. It goes to your point. Nobody really knows what the true north is right now.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, you mentioned some of the fanboys. So we did the last interview, and it was very popular. A lot of people came in. I like, what's this comment like? I like this one. Holy shit, Joe Casey changed the way he looked with Wildcats version 3.0. He's a stud. So way to go, man.
Wow. Well,
stud you.
My work is done, I guess.
Yes.
Excellent.
Just drop the mic at that point. But
right.
A lot of people made the comment we didn't talk nearly enough about Wildcats, and cited your Wildcats as definitive, as the
compared to what?
Oh no, but you worked on that time. I mean, it comment after comment after comment is people saying how much they love that series, and it was they own them all. It was revolutionary. One of the best superhero comics, team comics they've ever read. But so first, congratulations. I mean,
thank you. That's very nice of them to say that. Yeah. I would say this. I look at that book and that gig on two levels, and luckily they worked together to make something interesting. Hopefully, first and foremost, I think I started that gig in 2000, and at the time I looked at it as sort of scratching a fanboy itch, which was taking a established property that had some history, but maybe was not quite at its peak anymore, even though it had just been relaunched, so it was selling very well. I think as soon as people realized that Travis Charest wasn't going to be there every month, that people fasten their seatbelts for a bumpy ride. But it still, to me, scratched the itch of taking an old property and doing the spit and polish number on it. The whole Frank Miller on Daredevil, Alan Moore on Swamp Thing, Grant Morrison on Doom Patrol. That tradition of taking something that's there, doing your spin on it, hopefully elevating it in some way, or just doing good work within those parameters. And I look back, there's so few of those out there now. I can't even think of a Marvel property, a DC property, any real IP that's been around that hasn't been done to numerous times.
Yeah.
And with Wildcats, even though it had some good people on it, had James Robinson on it for a while, had Alan Moore on it for a while, and did great work. That when I did my version, those seemed like, even though they were only 5 years previous, they seemed like a lifetime before. So much stuff had happened in those late 90s years that when I started my run, it felt like a decent chunk of time had passed since that book had been relevant. So I was more psyched at the beginning to take my shot at having that experience as a creator and seeing what I could do with it. And in doing that, I stumbled into the subject matter that then carried that book into somewhat original territory for comics, uncharted territory for superhero comics, maybe, who knows, but it felt new at the time, and I was able to get some momentum on that to where between Sean Phillips on volume 2, Dustin DeGuin and on volume 3 or version 3.0, and Ryan Hughes designing the covers, it all kind of coalesced into something that was greater than the sum of its parts. And I include in the sum of its parts, it's Jim Lee, Brandon Choi beginnings. It was all part of something that luckily seemed to have some value to it beyond it being just one of the original Image books, one of the partners' flagship titles, and so yeah, I'm proud of the work that we did, and I'm shocked that people remember it, or I guess in some cases rip it off. I've seen a couple things that have got that same vibe to it that pop up here and there. It's good.
It's just, First Out to Person cited as revolutionary just in terms of what you did with the team. There's some other creators that we've had on the show came in here to talk about. That was one of the greats and inspirational to their work. Really saw it. I believe when Joe and I talked to Sean, he cited that run on Wildcats as being pretty incredible. So it's stuck in people's minds, and I think, when you're working on that, did you know you were coming up with something really powerful, or was it just kind of the story was flowing and worked?
Well, it found its own energy as it went along, and it's one of those things. That was a really fertile time of working for me, and that was probably when I was at my most visible, because I was doing X-Men, Superman, Wildcats, and I was doing another book at Wildstorm called Automatic Kafka, which was this wild, crazy book with Ashley Wood. So it was kind of at my peak of visibility in the mainstream, but at that point I was still doing what I considered maybe a little left of center work, experimental work. So I felt pretty good that I wasn't wasting my opportunity to get eyeballs on the shit that I was into,
It's the other book that people cited a lot, and they seem to I don't know, bridge the two together to some extent is Godland. And
right. Yeah.
We talked about that one last time as well, getting to work with Tom Scioli again. I wanted to ask about that. So this book ran 37 issues.
Yep.
And what is it? Is this book officially done? So people had some questions. They said that the door kind of was left open that this world would get revisited at some point. Is that a thing, or?
No, that book is done, and not
Okay.
because of any other reason other than we did what we set out to do.
Mm-hmm. Good.
The last issue was called Godland Finale, so I wouldn't necessarily want to go back on that.
I thought so. I didn't realize, but even I noticed that even Wikipedia is kind of citing that the end maybe wasn't clear cut, and it's anyway.
Well, maybe the end wasn't clear, but that's on me, I guess.
Well, I mean, you said finale. I don't know.
I know. I don't know how much more clear I could be, but in terms of the story that we told, I mean, it was that finale was pretty wonky and a bit. It was more of a coda than a finale because the series really ended all of its plot lines in issue 36, and then we did sort of a last epilogue-y kind of issue. But yeah, it's done. And I've had enough things end in a way that was not under my control that I'm quite happy that Tom and I ended that on our own terms, which we did completely.
Which I mean, it's in addition to just kind of the art feeling, Tom doing some kind of pretty incredible Jack Kirby style type work. And have you worked with Tom Scioli again since then, or?
No, I mean, I think we pretty much wrung each other dry with that one, and that was over. It was 37 issues, but it was over. It wasn't always monthly. I fully admit, and it took us probably. We started in 2005-ish, I think, and ended it in 2011 or 12, something like that. So I mean, that's 7 years for 3 years worth of issues. So it never got to be a grind, but it was that kind of a book that's that sort of over the top cosmic epic genre. You're always trying to push the boundaries a little bit and go further and further and further, and that. I mean, I don't want to. It's not. I mean, it's a first world problem, but it can eat up your imagination after a while.
Yeah,
it can take its toll on your ability to kind of keep pushing the envelope you've set out to push. So when we got to the finale, 7 years later, I think we both felt like, okay, we've taken this thing as far as we can possibly take it.
Yeah. And he's on Tom's on Cartoonist Kayfabe all the time now. He's on that channel. So.
Yes, he's done a very interesting public persona transformation. That's for sure.
Yes.
When you do a book like that, very cosmic, very it's not high concept exactly, but just huge reaching ideas. You kind of mentioned you get to the end of that and you want to go on to another title. You want to do your next project. Do you intentionally kind of pivot and do something very different?
Well, yes and no. I mean, yes, in the fact that you move on to different characters and different stories and different ideas. No, in the sense that I took a lot of things that I learned doing that book and applied it to a couple other things after the fact. That book, Godland, I mean, it's no surprise to anybody who's seen it and knows anything about comics that we were treating Kirby as a genre.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And working in what we consider that Kirby idiom, which was not necessarily, I mean, that's probably different for everybody, but for us it was, aside from how Tom depicted things visually, it was all about how far can you push things in your own imagination, how wild can you go, and how far can you skate on the edge of coherence and not fall off, I mean, because that's always the challenge with in that vein. Sometimes I read a Kirby comic from the 70s, and I get exactly what he's doing. It makes perfect sense. It all clicks. It's all right there. All the puzzle pieces fit together. Mm-hmm. Sometimes, or other times, I'll read that same comic, and I don't know what the hell's going on. It's just a bunch of words and a bunch of shit going on. It's great, looks great, and feels great, and has a vibe to it. But it's what you bring to it, which is, I think, what's great about comics in general is that interactive quality. What you bring to it is as much as what the creator brings to it, you know?
Yeah.
So at post Godland, I did a couple things. I think it kind of culminated in, for Dynamite, I did the Captain Victory miniseries that had like just a boatload of artists working on it. And that was kind of the pinnacle of my Kirby sort of journey, I guess you could say, creative journey. So that once I actually worked on a Kirby property and applied everything I learned on the image books that I had done that had kind of mined that same territory, that's when I was kind of done. That's when I sort of was able to put it down and say, there's nothing more I can do here.
Yeah.
You do fairly shortly after you move on to Sex, which is the other book a lot of people talked about. Wanted us to ask you more about the comment was it felt like a European style comic in the U.S. A lot of very fond feelings to that title. What was it like? I mean, that wasn't exactly overlapping in time, but you go from something like Godland to Sex.
That seems to make perfect sense to me, right?
Sure. Yeah. It's a nice argument.
But right there, you see the reaction to working in one genre or one style, that you want to go kind of as much in the opposite direction as you can. So going from a Kirby thing to a European adult soap opera, I mean, that was definitely a pivot that was scratching a different creative itch, purposefully scratching a different creative itch. And it's still, I mean, there's more to come. It's not, Sex is not done yet.
Yeah, no, that one's still going. I mean, do you find that going from well, let me ask you this. Do you get momentum working in a certain genre? And then if you do this pivot, do you risk losing your audience? Do you have to recapture the people again? Or how much does that come into play when you're wanting to scratch a different creative itch, but you also, want to keep momentum going?
That's a good question. I would have to say, to be perfectly honest, not much, because I never considered myself to have a loyal readership.
Okay.
Because I never, I mean, yes, we talked about this a little bit this last time. Yes, at some point I cultivated a certain image that was part of the zeitgeist of comic book creators in the early aughts, that kind of rock star thing. But it was more of a goof than anything else, and I never expected to translate into an audience that would just travel with me from project to project. I always feel like with every project, it's a chance to find a readership in general. I mean, I never assumed that anybody who, like you say, read Godland would ever pick up Sex. It just never crosses my mind. And I've tried to look at that in a healthy way, which is the weight of expectations are on the project and not on me.
Yeah.
If I do something that the subject matter or the genre is interesting to you, then you'll check it out. And if not, the fact that I'm writing it is not going to make any difference.
That's interesting. I think that's, we're hearing kind of a lot of the opposite. I mean, Scott Snyder's got a bunch of projects with Comixology. They're very different genres. And he's like, you're going to get the Scott approach for everything, right? Even though it's different. So it's interesting to kind of hear your take on that. Because I mean, I look at your publication list. Joe's not kidding. It turns out you have worked on everything. I mean, and your career-owned stuff is massive. I mean, the amount of stuff you've done, and it's hopping genres. I mean, you've covered. I'm trying to see if there's a genre you haven't covered.
I think for a writer or a creator, there's pros and cons to having a brand, a recognizable, identifiable brand. And I've never, in my own career, I've never been able to reconcile what I see as the good with what I see as the bad. And so and you really have no control over that anyway. So I don't think about it too much, but I think I have preferred the freedom of not being shackled by any particular expectations, except hopefully people know that I'm, when I do create our own book, that hopefully they feel like I'm doing it for the right reason, which is, believe me, not for the money.
Yeah.
You did Miami Vice remix 1 through 5. Like
I love that with Jim Mahfood. Come on now.
Nice.
Yeah.
Oh,
no. I mean, that's awesome. There isn't yeah.
I feel like that's a good approach, moving forward too, because I feel like we're kind of at that like sea change, and I think the branded writers who have kind of been dominating the field the past decade or so are in for a rude awakening, as I think things are really changing there. That's just the feel I get from everything. I'm not sure how you feel about that, but I kind of feel like we're kind of getting to that point where people are looking more at, like, I don't really care if it's a good story and it's the arts grid or something that resonates with me. You can build buzz on that, but I think the marketing approach of buy this book because it's so-and-so's the writer is waning.
Yes, I agree. I mean, I think, I'm going to get in a lot of trouble for saying this, I'm sure, but it's no secret that if there's one thing that white males know how to do, it's hold on to power. However, which accounts for the length of some of these careers and some of these the amount of time that some of these guys have been in that upper echelon of creators. But as you say, Joe, that shit doesn't last. It never lasts. And you find the brand that you built is as much of a prison as it was a pocket early on. The more you cling to it, the more it will drag you down.
Well, the quality. I mean, the title has to be able to be good, and if you're resting completely on your name, I mean, there is a lot less tolerance, I think, for coasting, and I think there's been some big names over the last 2 years or so that have found that out. That one of the big two poaches a giant name. He comes in. It doesn't create the buzz they want, and the name value itself, the title quickly sinks down to one of the lower selling books. And again, not to poke at anybody, but it does feel like 15 years ago that wouldn't have played out that way. That some of these big names would hold it.
Yeah.
Well, I have a crude label for that kind of situation. I call it fuck fame. And
okay, perfect.
Fuck fame is where you're famous because people want to fuck you.
Yeah,
has nothing to do with the quality of your work or what you produce or what you contribute to society. It's all about the surface of, I want to be in business with you because it lifts me up or my company or whatever.
Yeah,
and you see it in big Hollywood actors. You see it all over the place where people will allow you to do what you want because they feel like they're going to get something out of it just being associated with you on some level. But even big Hollywood stars don't have that anymore. That list gets shorter and shorter and will continue to get shorter and shorter as the ones that had real fuck fame, the Tom Cruises and the like, just inevitably age out of the things that they did to gain that fame. And nobody's really taking their place in the way that they held. And like I said, in the early aughts, comic book creators, God help us, bought into that as though we could take those same values of fuck fame and apply it to our own careers. And it was ridiculous.
Yeah.
When creators start talking about the one for them, one for you model of making comics, it's like it's all for them if you're going to talk that way. It's all for them. It's never for you. And when it is for you, nobody's going to care as much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know?
I think it also, I mean, playing into this is this speeding up of needing to get somebody to that position. So Tom Cruise, I mean, the example you use in movies, it did take him a while to get to that position. There were a number of years, a number of movies, a number of projects in order for him to have that drawing power. And as time has gone by, there's this pressure to get somebody to that state within a year. And
yes, because you can make money off them. You can exploit them quickly.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. But it's not sticking either. People can smell it. They don't want to be told, you know, superstar artist you've never heard of, but this is a superstar artist. We're telling you that, so you should pay more. And it's that, and none of that rings true anymore.
Well, and it also kind of pushes against the meritocracy of it all,
right?
Which bothers me a little bit because, you know, usually the artist, like you say, the new superstar artist is usually pretty good.
Yeah.
They're not, you know, they don't get picked because they're not good, but the circumstances on which they're being touted as the next big thing really cut into their ability to find their voice, you know, because now they're like, it's like, how can an artist after a year of working in the mainstream, for instance, be fully arrived and fully baked? It takes years and years to develop your craft, you know, and even if you've been drawing for 20 years before anyone's ever seen your work, once you're starting to be published, it's a whole new game.
Yeah.
So you got to have sympathy for these younger guys that are being, you know, the word is exploited.
Yeah.
And saying, you know, we're going to use you to try to make more money. Because we're gonna stir up the pot and make people think that you are that you are appointment television. Mm-hmm. You know, they got to be where you're at. And and look, I felt that way when I started getting some recognition, because I'd only been in the business for, I don't know, 3-4 years before I got the Uncanny X-Men gig. Mm-hmm. And at the time, I've just felt like such an imposter because the people around me in that office were, like I said before, Grant Morrison, Peter Milligan, Chris Claremont, and me. Which of these things is not like the other? You know, and I knew it, and I'm sure, you know, certain fans knew it and certain readers knew it, but I had the opportunity. I decided to fake it till I made it, and you know. Mm-hmm. I wasn't going to let my own insecurities keep me from taking the gig. They asked me to do it, and of course I said yes. But I do remember at the time feeling like, this is weird. This is real soon in a career to be getting these high-profile gigs. It was so early on that in the ramp up to even breaking into the business, I never thought those gigs would ever be attainable.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Or even they were never on my radar as something that I would aspire to go for, because I just thought, how many other writers would be in line before me that had been in the business longer, had a better reputation, were more deserving just from seniority's sake. And the fact that I jumped that line, to me, it still boggles the mind, except afterwards, jumping that line became, you know, the regular occurrence for X-Men. I mean, I certainly broke the barrier of inexperienced writers writing a flagship Marvel title.
A lot of people thank you, I'm sure, for that.
Yes. Well, the other writers that got those gigs, they should thank me.
Yeah. I mean, it feels like what you're describing is like taking somebody relatively new and untrained and saying, we're going to strap a rocket to your back. Don't worry, there's no parachute, but that will be your problem.
Well, there's two things involved there. One, you're expendable. So if the rocket blows up, who cares? But number two is that you haven't proven otherwise. You haven't proven that you won't make it. So the promise is there, and you know, people buy into that promise, like, oh, like you say, the next big thing. Well, and he could be, or she could be, until proven otherwise. You never know. Why not? Yeah.
Well, and you're not going to turn down an opportunity. I mean, in many cases, you know, I'll bet that there's a lot of people who can really kind of resonate and appreciate what you said there, of just, taking this job and feeling that imposter syndrome feeling of I don't belong here, but I'm going to do the best I can with it. I mean, is there, in your time at these companies, was there ever kind of an editor or a mentor or somebody who would come around and say, "Hey, this is probably shocking," or we're moving very quickly, but here, let's help you out? Was there anybody there to help?
Not really, but I didn't want that, to be perfectly honest. I didn't need any father figures. You know what I'm saying? I didn't. And pretty early on, I figured out how I wanted to operate in this business, mainly because I believed what I'd read when I was a kid and what I'd read as a teenager when I would read like the Comics Journal, Amazing Heroes, Comics Interview. The image that those creators I grew up on gave, for the most part, was that they had a lot of creative autonomy. I mean, the stakes were lower. So, David Michelinie could come on Iron Man and kind of do what he wanted and try things and make him an alcoholic and stuff. And I never assumed otherwise. I thought that's what, even in mainstream comics, there was a lot of levels of editorial and corporate masters. I still believed that if you played your cards right, that the end game on work for hire work was to kind of do what you wanted to do, not just to execute what they tell you to do. So all the time, anytime I had a run-in with an editor at either company, it was always because I wasn't getting to do what I wanted to do. And that was a problem for me. Now, looking back, I'm sure that I was overstepping my bounds on more than one occasion, but I'd rather go out on my shield than, slinking off the battlefield with my tail between my legs or just acquiescing.
Yeah.
That's what I tell everybody who's, young creators that I talk to, and they're starting to work at Marvel or starting to work at DC. I tell them, be a fucking boss, man. Don't be scared. Don't be fearful that you are going to lose that job if you don't play the game to their rules or their specifications. Go in there and knock shit over.
Yeah.
I mean, in the long run, you may lose out on a gig here and there, but in the long run, you're gonna have your self-respect. You're gonna have your creative identity intact, as opposed to being the guy who sold out at the first nudge from editorial. Don't do that. We need you to do this. Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir. That's no way to be creative, and that's not what everybody that came before us. Yes, they put up with shit. Yes, they had to bend over every once in a while. But I feel like for the most part, the best work was done in opposition of management, not in concert with management.
Sure.
But the element too that you mentioned is part of the drive in order to do a great job and to prove yourself is the reward. You saw one of the key rewards as autonomy, as being able to do what you wanted to do. So if you did a great job, if you pushed hard, if you worked and you went at it, one of the rewards was autonomy. You got to do what you want to do.
Yeah, and if you value your own creativity, that's the game right there. That's it.
Yeah.
That's what you want, and that's what will sustain you more than some page rate at Marvel or DC, which, as we've all heard, are not going in the right direction if you want to make a living wage.
I had this question. I think I've done a video about this, but I haven't published it yet. But who knows where it is in the pile? But I got this question. I'm curious to get your take on it, based on what you just said. Do people just have to kind of accept? Okay, I should preface this. I hate this question, but I'm curious to get your take on it.
All right, bring it on then.
Yeah, excellent.
Is it that everybody in comics, both the people working in it, the creators and the customers, have to accept that comics is really just a side hustle and it can't be a main job? There's not enough money in it, and you just have to accept that it's the spare hobby you do in your evenings.
Well, that is a good question. I hate it too, because you wish there was a clear-cut answer.
Yeah.
I was able to make a living solely from comics for about 8 years, 9 years maybe. Pretty good run. Pretty good run of being exclusively in that business. And I might have been able to go longer, but other things came in, animation and whatnot, and took my attention away, and took some of my focus away. So maybe I could have gone longer, but I think if you bust your ass, and I don't know, I mean, when I first started and was making jack shit for a page rate, I mean, a beginner's page rate, I made up for it in quantity. I wrote everything I could get my hands on. I took all the gigs I could get. Most of what was offered to me, I said yes to, because I felt like that was the easiest and quickest way to get my name out there. But I was also in my mid-20s and just paying rent on a crappy apartment, and I didn't have a family or kids or anything like that. I could afford to do that.
Yeah.
It seems like, and maybe you guys have info to the contrary, but it seems like people are breaking into the mainstream jobs sort of later and later in life. You know, it's not a bunch of 20-somethings. The 20-somethings are taking different routes to do comics. But new creators that are new to Marvel and new to DC seem like, to me, they come across as guys in their mid to late 30s.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely the case for, I feel like, writers. Some artists, I feel like you'll still get younger artists. But but writers, for the most part, tend to be in their mid-30s. Every once in a while, you'll see some in their 20s, but it's usually because they got to co-write with someone in an anthology or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, to me, that seems tough to break in to the mainstream and feel like you can make that living, like you say, at that age. Because, I mean, sure, there are plenty of 30-something folks that still don't have the mortgage or wife or husband or kids or those level of responsibilities. But damn, I mean, the things I've heard, you'd have to be writing more books than they want you to write to make up for the page rates that you're making at Marvel and DC. You know, you'd have to be writing 5-6 books a month, if not more. And nobody wants that. Nobody wants, you know, any one creator to write that many things. You know, that's too much.
But it also feels like the past couple of decades, we started seeing like the rise of the exclusive contracts and the like handful of, you know, writers and artists that make a lot more than everyone else, and then everyone else that's, you know, being nickeled and dimed every step of the way. It didn't seem like it was like that years and years ago, and that this seems like it was more the past couple of decades, but, you know, you might have more insight on something like that.
Well, I've never been exclusive to anybody.
Yeah.
And I saw that more in the 2000s as a Marvel versus DC game.
Yeah.
You know, keeping creators away from the competition. That, to me, that competition is non-existent now. I think those exclusives are just going away quickly, very quickly, and they're not coming back for a while. And if they do, they'll be very diminished. They'll hardly be, again, a deal that you can rest on your laurels. You know, like, okay, now I've arrived, I'm settled, I can buy a house now, or I can, you know, have my kids now, or it's not going to be that kind of deal.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of along those lines. We just had an artist over at DC get an exclusive gig, but it was interesting, the wording of it. It's kind of, to you said, it's not a Marvel DC thing anymore. It's we wanted to lock the person up for projects for 2 years. It was more of a scheduling exclusive than any kind of competitive. And I'm sure, I obviously don't know the details, but I'm sure you're right. The money isn't there. It's not the same kind of gig that it was.
Yeah, I mean, I think contracts exist sort of project to project now, as opposed to you will not do X, Y, and Z for, you know, A, B, and C. It's just, you know, and I don't even know what the value of those are, unless there's some financial, whamma jamma that they do to make it worth your while to sign that contract.
Yeah.
Because it's funny. I mean, like, even guys that have contracts that guarantee them work still get screwed on those contracts. We've seen it,
Mm-hmm.
Because the contract is really only one way. If the company decides to break the contract, well, what are you going to do about it? Nothing.
Sure.
There's nothing you can do about it. But if you break the contract, they'll, take shit away from you, I guess, or I don't know what they could do to you.
It feels. I mean, I don't know. It's hard to kind of read the tea leaves of what's exactly going to happen. But it feels like and I don't think these are many cases, there's some broader plan that goes beyond 6 months that they're going to try and lock people up to make sure they have them ready for this longer plan. But that's as far as it goes. It's purely just. It's kind of what you said. It's an extension of a project contract more than anything.
I mean, you could sign a guy, to write Batman for long term because you're pretty sure you're going to be publishing Batman for the next, however many years. But to sign somebody at DC to write, the new Martian Manhunter monthly.
Yeah.
What's the point? If that goes 6 issues, it's, people, throw a parade.
Well, I mean, and speaking of DC and Batman, when's your Batman book coming out? You've got to have one, right? They're giving them to everybody.
Well, you know what? No comments.
Okay.
That's fair. I feel like it's weird if someone's working at DC and they're not working on something Batman related at this point.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, you know what? I can't really say anything else.
Well, we look forward to. Can it be maybe Batman and the multiverse?
Okay, so we're gonna get back on the multiverse now. Okay, that's now we can have a little quick discussion here. Yes, because I'm with you guys. Enough of the goddamn multiverse.
Thank you.
Please.
Thank you.
It's ridiculous. I watched the video where you guys talked about it, and you raised the question is why can the movies do it and it kind of semi coherent where the comics it's just a goddamn free for all.
Yeah.
Because the movies have parameters. They have actors that you can't get back, or actors that age out, and no matter how much you CGI them, it's not going to work.
Mm-hmm.
Creative parameters are a good thing.
Yeah.
They can push you into places where you have to be more coherent and have to be better storytellers. But the comics, man, I mean, clearly they're gearing up to do anything and everything with this multiverse idea, and it's just going to confuse the hell out of people. And let me say for the record, I mean, I'm of a certain age where I was quite in favor, although I didn't have any trouble getting the different Earths, Earth 2, Earth S, Earth, all that, Earth X. I was in favor of Crisis on Infinite Earths as a story that was going to lead to other stories. And I would say if DC has a golden age, it's 1985 to 1989. Where they were, even though there was confusion and chaos, for the most part, fans could lock in on that post-crisis DC universe and feel like they had their feet underneath them.
Yeah.
And things that were trotted out like, Hawk World and things that, and Batman Year One and Wonder Woman's New Origin, all that stuff. You felt like you were on the ride with the guys at DC as opposed to just being thrown a lot of shit. I mean, there was, now we know, behind the scenes, there was a lot of post-crisis confusion at DC. They didn't quite know what they were doing. However, the age I was at and the quality of the material they were putting out, no matter how it connected or didn't connect, to me carried the day, and that's just my favorite period.
Yeah.
Of any comic book universe is that post-crisis. I mean, I'm a big Legends guy. That Legends series was one of my favorites, and not because it's the greatest story ever told, or it was yes, it's not a Watchmen or a Dark Knight, but it was such a great focal point for where the DC universe was And what sprung out of it was amazing. Justice League, Flash, Suicide Squad, all just great shit. So to go back to that post-crisis period, I would not point to, those stories as the most groundbreaking, envelope-pushing stories. It was about approach and about mood, vibe, and about, establishing the character's relationship with each other. That's not rocket science. That is not, that is not an approach that cannot be done again. It's a repeatable approach. It's just, I think people who have that idea get shot down.
Oh yeah.
Or it's not trusted to work. So I don't know.
It takes time, right? I mean, one of the things about Legends and some of the stuff that really came out of that was there was breathing room where they were giving years for some of the stuff to develop. It wasn't, we're going to do Crisis, and then we need to spike the sales again in 6 months. So you better have you better have another Crisis ready. So,
well, there was a little bit of that because after Crisis, they were going to do another Crisis called Crisis of the Soul, which was this kind of more supernatural based thing, which thank God they did not do. So it wasn't like Legends was years in the planning stages. It was like, we got to do something to launch these books and focus the post-crisis DC universe. Let's do this. And I may be just waxing nostalgic, but the energy of that period has just never been matched. And it had a lot to do with a lot of Marvel creators coming over to DC and a lot of indie creators coming to DC. So there was like this influx of new talent and energy. And I mean, it's gonna make me cry now.
No, but it's true. And some of their best-selling stuff today, when you pull up Amazon, it's Batman Year One. It's Byrne's Man of Steel. It's Perez on Wonder Woman. It's Grell on Green Arrow. Like,
yeah,
you'd think maybe there was some indication. Like, what is if they could do those kind of stories in the sense, like you were saying, where it's like it's about these like character interactions and these stories, and you can't do that when you're working on 6 issues to 6 issues and hoping that you get another 6 issues after that, or constant limited series. You're unable to replicate any of that storytelling anyway. And the sad thing, though, too, is when we're talking about Batman 89 next year, we're just going to be referring to the number of Batman titles every month.
Wow.
Yeah. It is I actually, before I forget, I do want to mention one of the other things came up outside of comics in the comments from the last interview is they want you to talk about your time on Generator Rex.
They do?
Yeah. Best action cartoon ever. This is his Generator Rex. The fandom must keep alive. This is one of the best shows that's ever been put on TV. Tell us about that.
Well, what people probably don't know is that it's based on a comic book that Joe Kelly and Duncan Rouleau did about an issue and a half of called M-Rex that came out from Image probably in 2000, 2001, somewhere around there. I might have my dates wrong, but it was an Image book, and it was something that after Ben 10 kind of hit, we pitched it to Cartoon Network. It went through its development because their comic was fairly esoteric. It was a lot of talking toasters, and those guys are wacky. And so we adapted it for animation, and it was I think we went 2 seasons, maybe 3. I'm not quite sure. And it had kind of a mini successful run. It was obviously not as popular as Ben 10.
Sure.
What happened was the toys did not catch on, but there were Generator X toys out there, and and we had more of a hand in that series than we even did the early Ben 10 seasons because we had more animation experience. So anybody who wants a call back to Generator X, I appreciate, because we worked pretty hard on that series. And it was supposed to be, I mean, this is not sour grapes. I mean, as with everything, the intentions of something are not always how it turns out. So if my memory serves, the lead character was supposed to be much more, Latinx. I mean, it was much more in that world and expressing that representation. And this was, 2010 or 11. I don't know. I get my years mixed up on when we actually did it. But of course, as it filtered through the corporate funnel, he got less and less culturally specific, and that was kind of a regret, because it felt at the time that we were pushing for that. We wanted that to be the case. Mm-hmm. So, we've tried it every so often. We actually did a Ben 10 special that's probably on HBO Max at this point that brought back Generator Rex. We did a crossover. So anybody who's
on HBO Max, yeah.
Yeah, so that was just from a couple of years ago. So anybody who's still into that property can go and get the fuzzy nostalgia feels all over again.
There you go. See?
Yeah.
We mentioned earlier kind of this crossover between comics and movies and kind of playing the two. Is it? Let's see. How do I want to ask this question? This has been another thing that's been asked to me where I hate the question a bit, and that's is the only way to judge a comic success is if it crosses over and becomes a movie? No. That is a good answer there.
Yes, because remember, I did the Officer Down comic book. That was I couldn't even call it a cult hit. It was just, came out. And then we did the Officer Down movie, which was also a cult hit, which means hardly anybody watched it. So the movie thing is no indicator of anything. What the relationship that I find because it's not across the board. Mm. And I'm sure you guys saw this too in your local shops. When WandaVision was out, they were selling truckloads of, Vision and Scarlet Witch collections and the Byrne West Coast Avengers and the Angel Hearts. I know, we just saw how many trades Invincible moved with the cartoon that came out.
Oh yeah.
But that hasn't been across the board as far as I could tell. It's not every show pushes every tie-in product. I find that fascinating. What crosses back over and what doesn't. I don't think that. Even though I've seen them on display in my local shop, I don't feel like there was a lot of Black Widow product that was moving. Mm-hmm. I doubt there's going to be a lot of Shang-Chi product that's going to move.
But the Eternals, that's going to do it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, but there's even examples of like the opposite. Like Scott Pilgrim was this like massive success as a comic and then bombed as a movie. And I feel like the movie not doing well, almost like that's kind of what sticks like to this day, is people go like, oh, that movie was didn't perform well at the box office. And like that seems to be what people remember, and not the millions of copies sold of the book and the giant lines of people waiting to meet, Brian Lee O'Malley, not like anyone from a movie, like to meet him. Like it was like a phenomenon, the book. And then the movie almost seemed to be like the end of it rather than, the start of something.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I would also say in that particular case, that's a very individual case, because I feel like, not to take anything away from that book series, but the movie, I'm not going to say it killed the book series.
Sure.
But it was a pop cultural pinnacle that just did what it did. But I feel like the movie has a bigger cultural footprint now than the books do. Even though it was a failure at the box office, the influence and the regard that people have for it now.
It had a second life for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely.
But I feel like it's talked about much more than the books are at this point. So that was an interesting deal.
Well, it almost felt like the movie, when it came out, kind of did kill off the books to some extent in that it underperformed, and then the movie became a cult classic somehow, and it had its second life, but never translated back to the books.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Which is very weird, but I mean, hopefully, Brian O'Malley's he wins no matter what.
Oh yeah, no, for
he's
sure.
financially happy.
Yes.
And he's put out some great work since then. So
yeah, exactly. I mean, forget about financial. I just hope he's creatively satisfied because the movie is legitimately great.
I agree.
I
had a lot of fun with that movie.
It's deserving of all the accolades it's amassed since it underperformed at the box office, which is like, to me, it's almost that being part of the story of that IP is perfectly in line with that IP.
Yes.
It makes some sense that the big movie was overhyped and underperformed and yet was legitimately great. And people have been finding it every year. New people find it. I'd rather be part of that narrative than, something like, name your poison of like flat, the Judge Dredd movie, the Sylvester Stallone Judge Dredd movie.
Oh yeah.
Hey, Rob Schneider was in one of those, I believe. So
he was.
Was he making copies?
Oh, that's okay.
I got that. I got
thanks
that.
For dating us.
Yes. Well. Oh God, but yeah, no. And there's other examples. I'm trying to think. I guess Ghost World was another like that. That's a weird example. Daniel Clowes' whole career is something else. So it's kind of tough to quantify it.
Let me say this, not because I don't want any of this to come across as negative.
Of course,
I only consider these things as projects because I feel like it's the fucking Wild West out there, and in a good way.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The chaos that's reigning at both companies, I only look at it as opportunities in hiding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because if they don't know what they're doing, then that's when creative people can step up and say, well, this is the way to go. This is the direction you should go. And unless they want to cut their nose off to spite their face, sometimes and oftentimes they will listen because they have no other ideas.
Well, and I think there is it's hard to tell exactly where the balance is, but I think there is a desire in these companies to get these new ideas and these pitches. I mean, they are. I don't think people are just sitting there going, well, it's burning down all around me, but I'm not going to listen to anything. I think there is a door open to hear these ideas. I think we've seen some projects that relate to that. So I hope some of them can pass.
Yeah.
From your mouth to God's ear.
And here's another idea. Why doesn't DC get your era of Superman in like an omnibus format or something like that? That's an idea for anyone listening.
Please. So many people. We talked about the Ringo issues, and you're doing these done in one stories, and everybody has a fond memory of that.
Well, that's good to hear. I mean, that's Superman's got such a long history to do anything that might stand the test of time. I'm more than appreciative of anybody who remembers that stuff because it seems like it was 20 years ago, and 20 years. It's one thing when you do something like Wildcats and then Wildcats goes away.
Mm-hmm.
There hasn't been constant publishing stories where people, can forget because there's just so much of it. With Superman, there is so much of it.
Yeah.
But for anything since John Byrne to stick out that's amazing to me.
Yeah.
Well, some incredible, so obviously an incredible talent too, working with Mike, but just some great stories. They did manage to capture, I think, some people's imaginations.
Absolutely.
I want to be sensitive. So I generally people about an hour and a half. That's about how long we take of time. But
sure.
What did we not hit? We talked about a bunch of things.
I think we've hit so many things that people are going to be puking when they hear this thing.
Yeah, well, we could save it for the next time too. So
yes, I was going to say you guys got to. I watched the live streams, and you made me sad, Perch. You had a video where you're like, I don't know what to do with these live streams. You've got it down, man.
Yeah,
really?
Okay. Oh my God! The format is there. All the sections. It's really enjoyable.
Oh,
and I find myself yelling. I mean, I always wait for the part where you put up the comics, from the old comics. Because I hear you guys talk about them, and I'm like, no, but there's this and there's that, and so it's my favorite bit.
Let's do one of those with you. So let's have you on live sometime. We'll do some of these classic covers.
Yeah. Anytime.
Awesome.
I think the only way that Joe in particular could match me is that pre-crisis Batman stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know how you know all that shit about it's like, damn, man.
He's got it. I have no idea how if there's a guy we've sometimes been on with. Joe's been doing some retrospective of him named Eric Breen, and between the two of them, like there's no you need no archive. It's just all.
Yeah, I've seen Breen on there. Breen is a force to be reckoned with too. But
yeah. No, I love Breen. I love busting his chops and telling people like he read Spider-Man in the original Sanskrit and things like that.
There you go.
Well, I
thought you were going to say that the favorite part of the live streams, of course, the Dynamite covers. But
I feel like that's a necessary evil that you got. You started that train and you got to ride that all the way to the station. You're locked into that nonsense now.
Yeah, ride it all the way is what a lot of people say about that bit.
Yeah. But I'd be happy. I'd have a blast doing that. I would. That seems like the time where you can really fanboy out,
Perfect. All right. Well, then we'll lock. We'll talk after this. We'll lock that up. I'd love to. I don't know. You're an amazing person to talk to, and I feel like every time we do this, like an hour or two later, I'm messaging Joe going, we forgot these 5 things.
Yeah, that's what always happens.
So, well, Joe, thank you very much for all your time tonight, and really appreciate. I hope people really enjoyed listening to the interview, and I can't. Yes. Wait. Where are you headed next? What's the thing people should be looking out for?
Yes.
Oh God, I'm horrible at this because I don't know. There's things coming out in a couple of years that I'm doing long lead times, and when I can talk about them, you guys will be the first to know because where the hell else am I going to talk about them?
And in the meantime, everyone just add Joe Casey to your Google alerts, so that way you're going to hear what he's working on, whether it's good or bad. You'll just get
exactly.
The alert, so.
Well, and guaranteed you have not read everything Joe Casey has done because he has done everything. So
it's true.
Time to go look at some of those issues, especially if you haven't seen that Superman run, of course, Wildcats, which we talked about. Go check out Vengeance. That is a great series.
Yeah, start going around claiming you're an OG America Chavez fan.
That's right.
Yeah.
And next time we can talk about my my Image Comics response to America Chavez.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I want to hear that. We've got to hear that story too. So,
yes, absolutely.
That's quite the story. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, Joe, thank you, and I guess we'll talk to you real soon.
All right. Take care, guys.
Thanks.